released in 1995, is one of those movies that feels like it was beamed in from a neon-colored alternate universe where the internet was both magical and vaguely terrifying. Directed by Ian Softly, the film follows a group of young, rebellious hackers navigating a digital underground while taking on corporate conspiracy. At the center of it all is Dade Murphy, played by Jonny Lee Miller, a former child hacking prodigy banned from computers until his 18th birthday. Once he's back online, he quickly falls in with a crew of elite hackers, including the fiercely confident Kate Acid Burn Libby, played by Angelina Jolie. Opposing them is the slick, unhinged villain Eugene the Plague Belford, played by Fisher Stevens. Supporting players include Matthew Lillard as the chaotic serial killer, Jesse Bradford, Lawrence Mason, and Renoli Santiago as members of the hacker crew. Now, what's interesting is that several of these actors would go on to much bigger recognition. Angelina Jolie, of course, became a global superstar with films like Lara Croft Tomb Raider and later an Oscar winner for Girl Interrupted. Jonny Lee Miller would later headline TV's Elementary, while Matthew Lillard became instantly recognizable thanks to Scream and later as Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo franchise. Fisher Stevens had already made an impression in films like Short Circuit, and Lorraine Bracco was riding high from Goodfellas and would soon become iconic on The Sopranos. When Hackers first hit theaters, critics did not love it. Reviews at the time often dismissed it as style over substance, criticizing its wildly exaggerated depiction of hacking and its almost cartoonish visuals. The internet-savvy crowd, small as it was in 1995, also poked holes in its technical inaccuracies. Audiences were a bit more forgiving, especially younger viewers, but it wasn't exactly a box office juggernaut. It kinda hovered in that awkward space of cool concept, questionable execution. But as sometimes happens with ambitious projects like this, Hackers didn't fade away. It leveled up. The film found a second life on home video and cable, eventually becoming a full-blown cult classic. What critics once saw as flaws, like the hyper-stylized hacking sequences and the technobabble, those are now part of its charm. The movie is less about realism and more about capturing a feeling, a vibe, a moment when the internet felt like the Wild West. Watching it now, it plays almost like a time capsule of mid-90s cyberculture, complete with rollerblades, payphones, and rave-inspired fashion that looks like it escaped from a glow stick convention. And honestly, that shift in reputation says a lot about how audiences engage with media over time. Back then, people expected a certain level of realism, or at least coherence, in how technology was portrayed. Today, we're much more willing to embrace stylization, especially when it's this distinctive. Modern audiences raised on everything from The Matrix to stylized cyberpunk games can appreciate hackers as a kind of fantasy, rather than a literal depiction of computer crime. The themes hit differently now, too. In 1995, the idea of hackers as counter-cultural rebels fighting against corporate greed felt edgy and speculative. Today, with ongoing conversations about data privacy, corporate surveillance, and cybersecurity, those themes feel surprisingly relevant. The movie's central conflict, big corporation versus decentralized digital rebels, lands with a bit more weight in an era of massive tech companies and constant data breaches. There are also interpretations that audiences might have missed back then. Beneath all the flashy visuals and quotable one-liners, Hackers is really about identity, how people construct themselves in a digital space. The characters are known more by their handles than their real names, and their reputations are built on skill, not background. That idea feels incredibly modern, almost predicting the way we curate identities on social media and online platforms today. Back in the 90s, that concept was novel. Now, it's just Tuesday. And then there's the influence. While Hackers didn't immediately spawn a wave of imitators, you can see its DNA in later films and shows that deal with digital worlds. The visual language, the floating text, the abstract representations of cyberspace helped pave the way for more ambitious portrayals of technology and media. Again, The Matrix is the obvious comparison, though it took a much more philosophical and polished approach. Even modern series like Mr. Robot owe a tiny debt to Hackers for making the idea of the hacker as a protagonist feel cinematic. Of course, we can't talk about Hackers without mentioning its most iconic moments. "Hack the planet" is probably the line that stuck in everyone's brain, delivered with such earnest intensity that it loops right back around to being awesome. The imagery is just as memorable. The neon-lit hacker hangouts, the surreal cyberspace visuals that look like someone turned a screensaver into a fever dream, and Angelina Jolie casually exuding cool in a way that basically defined 90s alt culture aesthetics. Watching the film now, years later, there's a certain warmth to it. It feels handmade in a way that a lot of modern, tech-heavy films don't. The effects are dated, sure, but they're also imaginative. Instead of trying to perfectly simulate reality, the movie leans into abstraction, turning hacking into something almost mythological. It's less about what hacking is, and more about what it feels like. Fast, chaotic, and dangerous. And maybe that's why it endures. Hackers isn't trying to teach you how computers work, it's trying to capture a moment in time when the digital frontier felt limitless, when logging onto the internet felt like stepping into another world. It's messy, it's ridiculous, it's wildly inaccurate, and it's also kind of perfect because of that. So if you revisit it today, don't go in expecting realism. Go in expecting a neon-soaked, techno-scored love letter to the early internet age, and honestly, you might find that it holds up better than you'd expect. Not in spite of its quirks, but because of them. So what's one thing Hackers gets surprisingly right? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to join me for more trips back to the video stores of old.